This is session 94, and it is dedicated to equity, creating engagement, and access and opportunities. Now, the two folks that will be joining us are probably in the midst of a very big crowd. So, to be respectful of that, I'm going to take a moment to brag on the amazing voices that will be here, and I'm going to share their bios. And there they are. We're going to go ahead and get things going. But it is such an honor to be here. I have been friends with Nicole for many, many years, and I'm excited to meet both Drs. Herring and Dr. Herring. I just said my name is Catherine Poggi. Thank you for being with us. Absolutely. So the bios that were submitted were, one, Dr. Chuck Herring. He is coming to us as a highly accomplished educational professional with almost 30 years of experience in the field. He's currently serving as the Director of Diversity and Equity and Inclusion at the South Fayette Township School District, which is in my region. I need to come visit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Dr. Herring is responsible for fostering a culture of respect and dignity for all individuals within the district. His approach involves educating colleagues on best practices for mitigating school-based trauma, providing restorative practices to support students, and in helping students return to school. We are very fortunate to have his wife, Dr. Chrissy Herring, join us, so thank you. I don't know, did we have...
So I was not supposed to be on this panel, but I was invited because it was just going to be the two of them, and everything he knows and in his bio, I taught him.
I love that.
Just ditto that. You don't even need a bio from me. You just read it. And I'm excited to be joining the panel.
We have esteemed intelligence right here. I love it. So thank you. And then obviously at the end we have my dear friend Dr. Nicole Holland-Sims. She is a senior educational consultant and strategist for Holland-Sims Consultation, and she formerly served as a technical assistance coordinator for the Midwest PBIS network and was a former special education assistant to the Secretary of Education at PDE. Additionally, she has been a part of the educational patent system, which has been amazing. So we have a powerhouse of intelligence up here, and they were kind enough to submit a couple questions, and we're going to go ahead and get started. All right. And did you want to handle things naturally as questions came up to expand topics?
Sure.
Okay. All right. Boy, it got quiet in here. All right, so the first question that was submitted, and Nicole, I'm going to address this one to you.
Okay.
How do you define educational equity, and why is it essential in today's educational landscape?
Excellent question. I think when I consider the definition of equity, I'm going to come at it from a very technical definition. The one that I have often used in my work is connected to an organization called CCSSO. If you're not familiar with that organization, essentially they are the group that brings all of the secretaries of education and commissioners of education from across the nation together to really brainstorm and have a brain trust around particular topics related to our educational ecosystem. And in 2018, that organization sat down and said, what does equity mean in education? And at the time, the president of that organization was our former secretary, Pedro Rivera. So if anyone remembers Pedro in that space, he was really instrumental in the development of this definition. And so it's the one that I've adopted and have most closely aligned to. And essentially it's saying that every learner deserves access and opportunity to rigor and resources they can obtain at the right moment across a multitude of identities, whether that's gender, race, gender identity, sexual orientation, family income, etc. What I love about that definition particularly is that the and opportunity part, if you heard me speak earlier, was not a part of the original definition. And one thing that I thought was important upon going to the Department of Education was to add the opportunity component. Forgive me again if you were in my session, but what I said was that if you think back to March 13th, 2020, and I hope nobody has a flashback that's too negative, but if you think back to that time when we were told schools are shutting down in Pennsylvania, we're done, schools really, they pivoted quickly and got devices into the hands of students that needed them. Unfortunately, what we didn't account for were the deserts that exist in Pennsylvania that are related to Wi-Fi. So in an earlier session I shared, you had students going to the McDonald's parking lot, to a church's parking lot, even to their friend's home to get the opportunity to leverage the access of the device and actually participate. I use that example because oftentimes, and I'm sure my colleagues are going to talk about this, there's so much noise around the word equity itself that sometimes people lose sight of just how broad the concept is. So what I just illustrated to you is an example of a concept that touched every single one of us, and it didn't matter our zip code. So that's how I articulate and define equity, especially as it relates to education.
Fabulous. All right. So next question that was considered and shared. So I'm going to direct this to you two collectively, the brain trust.
The best Dr. Herring. I'm the mediocre Dr.
There you
Herring.
go. Because she already told us. She learned everything from you.
No, flip that. I learned everything from her.
Oh, forgive me. That is what I intended to say. I stand corrected. All right. So what we were asked to share for this is, can you share specific examples of strategies or initiatives that have successfully promoted equity in your educational community?
You can start because you're in the school right
All right, great. So several things that have happened, but one thing that if you were in the session, you heard about SHOUT, my students, social handprints, overcoming unjust treatment. That was something that most people don't think about when they're thinking about how to do this work. You have to bring in our vested partners, and the vested partners that I'm talking about are our students. Our students are definitely the ones who lead the work where I am. This is what I tell the students. Listen, this is an advocacy club, but what it really is a leadership organization where we mold, mentor, train, and develop leaders. And each of you are going to have an opportunity to be a leader in something before you graduate from here. And every year you're going to have multiple opportunities to lead an initiative. And one of the initiatives that we have right here, and this actually happened because of March 13th, 2020, is this book. And I brought this book here because I didn't go to Helsinki, I came to Hershey. Yeah. Those of you, because I brought this book here, though, my students. This is how they raise money. So if you guys are interested, I have a couple of books here at $20 a piece. Phenomenal. I call it 130 pages of awesomeness. But this book came about because of what was going on in the pandemic. And our kids, instead of shutting them out, and I love what you said about the deserts on Wi-Fi. And people are looking at the world through a flashlight. We looked at the world through a floodlight. And our kids were like, Doc, we still need to meet. So I met with those kids all throughout the pandemic. Every Sunday at 6 o'clock, we met for at least an hour, and we unpacked how their weeks were going, how their days were going, how they were living, how they were going day to day. And I think that turned our little club into a major force. And through that, some of the kids were telling me how they were feeling, like they were feeling blue, they were feeling lonely. And I would reach out to their parents on the side, but in the between time, I would give them advice. And one of the things I said is that, a lot of times when people are feeling down, they write. And then through that conversation, I said, you know what we should do? We should write a book. And the funniest thing I'll never forget is that young lady said to me, Doc, do you think that we could write a book? I said, do you know how many horrible books are written every year? And I said, we're going to write a book, and it's going to be freaking phenomenal. And we did. So buy this book, support my kids, $20.
I love that. So expand upon, please.
And what I'm going to say is not anything really different from what was said, but I believe repetition is the mother of all learning. And so I want to repeat again that it's student voice. I go in and work with a lot of schools as a consultant, and often I'm sitting in the rooms with all adults, the administrators, and there's no student voice. And we tend to, as adults, think that we know what our students need or make assumptions about what they need, and then come to find out that all the programs and all the things that we're implementing are not creating that sense of belonging or not supporting the students. And so the most important thing, any program that's going to be designed cannot be the best that it can be unless you involve student voice.
Could I add to that?
Please, that belonging.
Yeah, it's jogging a couple thoughts for me, and I love being with these two. I'm like their second child. I try to be up under them as much as possible because they're a wealth of wisdom. And so one of the things that I heard Dr. Herring mention was this concept of the value of student voice. And I'm looking at Julie Brown, because there's some great work happening in Pennsylvania around student voice, and I want to bring attention to it because these are things that could be replicated in other parts of our Commonwealth. So Julie used to work for an intermediate unit, and there's a collaborative intermediate unit experience that happens almost every October that focuses on the student version of what you're participating in throughout this conference. It's a forum led by students. So the high school students come up and do like we're doing and talk about their experiences, things that they've learned, and empowering the other students in front of them, like Dr. Chuck said, in leadership and how to build those skills up, but hearing it from peers, where the adults just kind of sit on the side and watch the magic happen. And so it's IUs 8, 10, and 11 that have put this on for almost, Julie, 6 years almost?
It's probably more like
8.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's highly attended. Middle school and high school students are welcomed. And so I'm sharing that to say that there are opportunities that you can do that may not be at the same scale, but even within your districts, you could create those spaces where students are actually informing what it is you're doing. From an equity, inclusion, belonging lens, I found that recent alumni, are valuable when they come back and sit in front of their former teachers and say, this is how school felt for me. Teachers have said that was the best professional learning I could have ever had. So just offering some of those other options when you consider how valuable student voice can be.
Amazing. We've been going maybe less than 10 minutes, and we're already elevating our authors in the room, our youth voice, the collaboration. Thank you. So next question, Nicole, and this is going your way.
Okay.
What is MTSS, and how does it contribute to ensuring equitable educational opportunities for all students?
So this is by far my favorite question. I feel like I'm an MTSS cheerleader, like I need a uniform and pom-poms, because everywhere I go, I tout the value of systems level thinking. And so multi-tiered systems of support essentially is that framework that we insert practices into in a way. Remember that definition I gave about that right moment in time for a student to get what they need? A multi-tiered system of support creates that mechanism for us to know when that right moment might be. How, you say? Because the data that we're consistently evaluating is going to give us the insight on where the supports need to be and when. So multi-tiered systems of support, in my estimation, is the vehicle to equitable practices. When people say, how do I do this equity stuff? There's a multitude of ways to approach it, but one way to really begin is to adopt a framework that allows you to align and synthesize everything you're doing. There's a slide that I use typically that shows a bunch of arrows pointing to us, like restorative practices, check-in, check-out, equity work, mental health. We're all inundated with a number of things, innovations, initiatives that people have said, ooh, shiny new object. It's like squirrel. Let me look and grab that, right? It happens. How can we put those things in a way that makes sense so we're not just spinning in a hamster wheel? And MTSS provides that structure for our PBISers in the room. I use those terms interchangeably. So we don't get confused that, oh, we're doing PBIS, so we're not doing MTSS. They are very much synonymous. So I just want us to be very clear on that. And that's where I feel equity really lends itself to having a mechanism to actually be actionable.
Fantastic. Any expansions on that?
She's the guru.
I know, I'm deferring. Absolutely, the best Dr. Herring. Would you like to take that?
The only thing that I would add to that, the one thing that I love when Chuck speaks is he talks about being a kindergarten teacher. So both of our backgrounds is in early childhood, and we like to keep things simple. And so I like to give like one word kind of things that you can take away. And everything that Nicole said, but the piece that is so important, what she said, is listening. And often, we're not listening to what's right in front of us. We get in our own way. And so that listening piece and that willingness to be vulnerable and take chances and go outside of what might be comfortable to you when you're implementing a structure, and being okay to say, okay, this is too much. I'm just gonna focus on this one thing, and I'm gonna focus on doing this one thing well.
That's really powerful, and I think that connects to Nicole this morning, and you talked about the noise, and you just alluded to it, to quiet it down and to listen, and it's those relationships. So in that same framework logic, let's think about what role does data play into that? So database decision-making and MTSS, how can it be used to progress monitor? And if needed, how can we adjust?
So with the database decision-making, one thing that I mentioned in the session earlier, and I think both Dr. Herrings have really spoken to this well, is that numbers are not the only forms of data. And I think sometimes we get very hung up on the numbers we're given and the outcomes that we're looking at, and we forget, and I'm not saying this to blame anyone, but we forget that there's a human behind the number. And so we have to be aware that as we're making those database decisions, that we're not just solely focusing on the quantitative, but also the qualitative components that align to the numbers we're seeing. So I often share that my son is 6, he's just started kindergarten, and as I was starting to make decisions about where he would go, part of that decision making was, and I shared earlier, as educators, sometimes we know too much and we have access to a little too much information, and this was the case for me, where I could look and see how disproportionate my home district is as it relates in this case to discipline, which is my wheelhouse. And so what was interesting is when I looked at that, we look at risk ratios. So with risk ratios, it's the predictability or the likelihood of this many times more likely an outcome happening. A 1.0 would be an equal level of risk, right? When I looked at my home district, the risk ratio was 7.5. Okay, so your reactions are consistent with what I thought. So for those that aren't familiar with risk ratios, I don't want to take it for granted. So what that essentially meant was that my Black son will walk into kindergarten next to a friend, and I'm so blessed that he has a little best friend named Clay, who happens to be a white boy. If the two of them walked in together, my child, simply because he's my child, is 7.5 times more likely to receive either a referral or a suspension. Database decision-making from that school team would say, we got a problem, Houston, and we need to do something so that every child walks in with the ability to experience school in a way where that is not a worry or a concern. As a parent, as an educator parent, I knew what my options are. Not every family does. And so it becomes our duty as the educators in the space to look at the data, put humans behind those numbers, and problem solve in that way. And so for me, database decision-making becomes the core of everything related to multi-tiered systems of support. The progress monitoring component is checking in on that data, not just once a year, monthly, quarterly, however often, to ensure that the progress that we're making is sustainable, or if we need to come back to the drawing board. So for me, database decision-making is something that we cannot ignore, and we cannot truly say we're doing MTSS, PBIS, fill in the blank, unless we're actively looking at data.
Fabulous. Any expansions?
I'm not smart enough.
Stop it.
I don't believe that. So in that same vein, I don't want to interrupt.
No,
you.
I'm good.
All right. So in that same vein, we know how important data is, but I'd like to circle back just to that role of relationship. And you just spotlighted, I mean, the amazing example of connecting with your youth on Sundays at 6, this amazing book that was the outcome. It dovetails one next question. So how can educators foster a culture of student engagement, particularly among historically marginalized groups?
Now I feel smart again.
You're going to dig into the relationships.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that, so many people, and I kind of touched upon this a little, not deeply, but a little bit in my session, and it's like teachers being afraid of making mistakes. And with our traditionally marginalized and disenfranchised students in particular, I hear this all the time. I don't know what to say to them. I don't know how to talk to them. I'm like, what do you mean? They're 15. They're 15-year-old kids. Talk to them like any other 15-year-old kid. Like, what did you do this weekend? Nothing. You know what I'm saying? So then you go a little bit deeper. All right, I know you didn't do nothing. Just give me one thing that was kind of cool this weekend. We went to Sky Zone. Really? What happened to Sky Zone? Oh, I did this kind of flip. My brother fell, he busted his lip. Well, is he okay? Yeah, but it was kind of funny. Oh, man, that's not funny, but it is kind of funny. And then you just have a conversation, and you're building this relationship with the kid like any other kid. I don't understand it. It really frustrates me sometimes, but I get it because we talk about fear, and we're living in a culture of fear. And again, going back to the session, anxiety is at its highest when knowledge is at its lowest. And so when most people get into these spaces, they feel like they look at the world through this flashlight, and they see the flashlight as, you look different than me, therefore you must be different than me. But if you were in that session, and I hate to keep referring back, that's weird, isn't it? But I'm referring back to it because I literally just walked out of there. I refer to it, it's like we're all these things, and I refer to intersectionality. Who am I? I'm a husband, I'm a son, I'm an educator, I'm a father, I'm a black person. So, but all these things that we have in common, you're looking at the one thing that's different, and you want to, be afraid to talk to me about the one thing that's different. And it's like, really and truly, it's not even different. It's just a hue of skin. It's a different lived experience. I'll give you a case in point. My wife and I, we have 4 daughters. And our daughter, Ashley, she is 35. She's 35? Dang. So Ashley is married to a white man. But the thing is our kids are very suburban. They're very Hillary from the Fresh Prince. But my wife and I, we're very Will, not this version of Will, but let me stop. But very, we're very urban. We're very urban. We grew up in an urban setting, and so our son-in-law, one of our sons-in-law, the gentleman happens to be white, is much more culturally in line with us because he was the white kid who grew up in the projects. So culturally, if you look at him, you would say, that's some white dude. But when you deal with him, you understand that he understands what's going on in the community. And the beautiful thing about that is that, him being in our space and him understanding the strength that he has because of his advantage. And so what I mean is that he's a white man and he has an advantage. Not that it makes it right or wrong, it just makes it is what it is. And so he understands it, and so but he utilizes it for good. And again, back to my session, a lot of white dudes use their whiteness for good. Hence, we're all in this room together. Because I don't know about y'all, but I didn't think that there were anybody but white dudes in the room when the 19th Amendment was passed, when women got the right to vote. Because you couldn't even be elected. There wasn't any anybody but white dudes in the room when they passed the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. So white guys are doing they've done and are doing great things. It's just that a lot of times we're looking at the world, going back to that flashlight, we're looking at the world through the flashlight and not the floodlight. And we need to go ahead and shine that light on everything so we can look at a full 360-degree perspective instead of a short, narrow, fearful view.
Fabulous. Would you like to expand?
Yes, just a gem that I can give you right now that I used to use when I was in the classroom to deal with this very thing and to create that flashlight is I always, and I would share this with the student teachers that I mentored. I always saw my classroom as a laboratory. And when I came in the classroom, I realized I was bringing in a certain set of lived experiences and skills. My students were bringing in a certain set of lived experience and skills. And then together, we created what I would call that third space in our classroom, where I would learn from them and they would learn from me. And I found that to be that way of creating that floodlight because I had students that knew things that I didn't know because of their lived experiences. And I never made the assumption that I held all the knowledge in the room. And so that's a real easy way, if you can go into those spaces and realize you don't hold all of the knowledge. And it's really just about lived experiences. Your lived experiences limit what you know, but others' lived experience can expand what you don't know.
Excellent. So in that same vein, and to expand that community and the extension of knowledge, and I think also touching on your notion of the deserts, Dr. Chuck, this one's for you. In what ways can schools ensure that all students have equitable access to high-quality educational resources, including technology and all learning materials?
Oh, that's a good one. How can we ensure that? To be perfectly frank, you can't ensure anything.
True.
So do not attempt to do that. But, again, that's the smoochie. You might not be able to change the world, but you can put a dent in it. And so some of the ways that you can actually help do that is to become an advocate, is to support. Like we actually started this project a year ago, about a year and a half ago, called Parents as Allies. And working with Parents as Allies, that's one of the reasons why I was invited to go to Finland today. And I'm here in Hershey. I'm supposed to be in Helsinki, y'all. But I'm here in Hershey, and I'm loving it. And that's why you have to buy my book. My kids need it. But Parents as Allies, thank you. We actually, especially this pandemic, it really showed some of the worst of us. And again, it goes back to that fear. And that fear is really false evidence appearing real. And there's a lot of people who just deal and pander in fear, and that makes, the more fear they can gin up, the more money they make, the more power they get. And so my job, again, as a kindergarten teacher, somebody who's pedagogically trained to take complex things and make it simple, is to be able to knock that fear down by giving you knowledge. So one of the things we did with Parents as Allies is that we were working to bring parents and faculty members together in spaces where we weren't talking about, well, why did my child get a 79 instead of 80? No. We're going to get together and we're just going to see each other as human beings. We started working with things in places off campus. We said we're going to go ahead and make it meet in a neutral ground. One of the things that we did was something called Painting Unlocked. It was supposed to be called Painting Without a Twist, but I don't know what happened. Some parents got some twists up in there. So it's Painting Unlocked. And it was a really amazing event, though. I mean, the parents came, they brought their family, they brought their children. They had to unlock these boxes with like a dozen locks on them, and they had to figure out the clues, and they had to work with the faculty members. And so now we're not here sitting in this space where there's an unequal relationship or somebody is dealing with school-based trauma, because there's a lot of folks, including us, who have dealt with school-based trauma. So you come into school, you automatically start getting itchy. So we're not in the school. We're here, and now we're working is equals, and we're trying to figure out and resolve this challenge. And once we resolve the challenge, then we got together and our art teacher there, going through the whole painting thing, and it was just phenomenal. So we actually put a line item in our budget to do a lot more things, parents as allies. We do things like we have our speaker series. We invite people in. We're all about inviting people to become a part of our community. We're all about asking you, hey, you have this skill set, open-walled education. You can come to us and bring your skill set, but would it be okay if we came to you and be able to learn what you do? We've taken kids to robotics factories. We've gone to brought in stockbrokers. Our third graders actually came in the top 10 in the Pennsylvania Council on Financial Literacy stock market game because we had somebody from Goldman Sachs who I knew. I said, hey, come and talk to my kids, man. And so that's the type of stuff that we do. So when we start bringing these types of people together, now it's not this adversarial relationship. It's really this communal relationship, and everybody sees that we're all on the same team. So I think I might have went off a little bit, but I think that I was pretty close to being on.
I think that was incredibly being on.
Oh, yeah, thank you. And we formed a partnership with Children's Hospital. The Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh's foundation. We actually partner with them, Parents as Allies, and Shout. I brought the three of them together to form a speaker series with my partner, Dr. Kevin Maurer. He's phenomenal. I wish he could be here today. You would see him. And all we do, everybody thinks that all we do is just laugh and joke all day. But I'm like, but how does all this stuff get done? And the one thing that I find, if you go on our website, if you go on our Twitter page for South Fayette, you'll see from Halloween, our superintendent, our assistant superintendent, our director of innovation, and our director of curriculum dressed as Dorothy, the Cowardly Lion, because we are more fun than serious. Because so many people take education and they think that education has to be serious and grim. It doesn't have to be grim. It is serious though. And you can have fun while being serious. And that reflects that, I don't believe in trickle-down economics. I'm not asking you what your policies are, but I do believe in trickle-down leadership. And our leaders I'm one of the leaders. I'm more fun than serious. Our superintendent is more fun than serious. And now it's pervading throughout the whole community. And once you have that, people want to be there. People don't want to not come. The kids want to be there. And that's one of the most important things because, again, getting back to our constituents, our vested partners, those are our students. We need to make sure that they are at the forefront of all of our thoughts. I don't know. I think I went off track there.
I think it's fantastic, and I think the group is nodding. That was a fabulous little extension. So the next question actually links in. You've highlighted that power of relationships, the power of exposure, and getting things to their forefront. What about our learners that need that bridge that don't have access to technology or ways that they can digitally see the world? Are there steps and things that you can share to help get them connected to devices, internet, and all of those things that allow their minds to grow?
So as far as my school district is concerned, we've been one-to-one for over a dozen years or so. Like from, we were first through 12th grade, and then during the pandemic, we were K through 12. iPods, K1, 2, and not just Chromebooks, but like really fully functioning PC laptops from 3 through 12. They all have the same ones. But in other districts, I've seen some things, and I'm not going to name any names, but I've seen, I know that you have the ability, but do you have the want to and the desire to? And that comes from, who are the leaders? What are the leaders really thinking about? What is the main, you have to make the main thing the main thing. So South Fayette was, 20 years ago, cows and coal mines. It literally was cows and coal mines. And now you walk up in there and it opens up like the Wizard of Oz. It is the Emerald City. Because we had leaders who were like, this is what we want for our kids. And we don't have a large tax base. As a matter of fact, we're landlocked. We're surrounded by districts that have all of the money. Like, for example, I don't know if you're familiar with Pittsburgh, but if not, if you're in the state of Pennsylvania, I'm sure you've heard of Mount Lebanon, Upper St. Clair, Peters Township. We border all of those all of those places, and none of the businesses are in South Fayette, but South Fayette is in there making things happen because our leadership wants to make things happen. And so we partner with the community, and that's something else too. In partnership with the community, you have to bring people in, and you have to ask for what you want. Most people don't ask, so therefore they don't get. So, I mean, I can keep going, but I feel like I'm taking up too much space, so I'm going to pause here.
Well, this next question extends that. So
Okay.
we're in a really good momentum. So knowing that you want to create these relationships and that you're trying to partner with all of these surrounding areas, can you share a little bit about how schools and educators can create opportunities for students to think in the future? So experiences for career pathways and where they may want to go, regardless of their background or resources.
Absolutely. I mean, this is how fast things happen in South Fayette. January of this year, we were reached out to. You guys familiar with Digital Promise? Mm-hmm. So Digital Promise reached out to us and said, hey, because we don't have money, but we're really good with the money that we get. And so people call us up and say, hey, we got some money. So they asked us, we're thinking about starting this whole cybersecurity thing. Do you want to be down? Sure, we'll be down. Not having any clue as to what we were doing. We'll do this. And one of the things that we did, talking about equity, inclusion, and belonging, is we said we're going to do this. The first thing we did was we went and we focused on our opportunity youth, meaning our disenfranchised and marginalized students. And South Fayette looks, again, like the Emerald City, but we have about 15-20% free lunch. We have old South Fayette versus new South Fayette. We have a lot of marginalized folks who, like, racially or ethnically are marginalized. And so we talked to the families who wouldn't ordinarily participate in those programs. But once we got that started and we got the people involved in it, this program that we started at South Fayette and 10 other school districts across the nation, we opened it up in August 24th. That was the first day of school this year. August 24th, we opened it up. And now our kids in 3 years, so if you're a 9th or 10th grader in South Fayette right now, you can graduate from South Fayette School District with a certificate in cybersecurity, and you can walk out the door making $80,000 to $100,000 a year. So that is not a job, that is a career. And there are 3.5 million open jobs in cybersecurity that we do right now. So we did that, and that's how fast we turned it around, from January to August. We did the same thing from August to August with esports. Do you know that esports, kids are getting full scholarships to go to college to play video games? And it was like, they are? We need to be doing this. August to August, we went out, my partner in crime, Kevin Maurer, and I, and our Director of Innovation and Technology, we went and visited about 5 or 6 different places, high schools, colleges, and universities, and talked to them about their esports teams. I was more in the background on that, but again, opportunity youth, I'm really good with them, really connected with all the student body, but our opportunity youth, they really see me and they connect really well with me. So making sure that they're part of that. So now our esports teams, we started a pilot program. The kids brought in their own games in January, because the kids have games. If you want to start an esports team, you don't have any money, hey, can you bring in your PlayStation? We'll hook it up here, and then this year we took money from a little bit. Everybody has extra money in their budgets, like, just a little bit. It might be $1,000 that you didn't use this year. And we went through and we got extra money from like just about every budget on campus. And then we put that together in a pool to start to build an esports room. And now we have all of the things that we need to make this amazing esports arena. And our kids are in there, and they just started this year, undefeated, kicking butt and taking names. Because the one thing that we talk about is, what's the number one thing to do is have fun, but what's the most fun? Winning. If there's a trophy to get, we come in to get it. And that's it in a nutshell. So we talk to our kids about winning and talking about being the best and preparing yourself to be the best. And I was getting ready to say something before. I was thinking I was talking too much, but now you gave me the mic, so thank you.
Keep on going.
But I want to say that if you take a look at your mission statement, and again, I'm paraphrasing our mission statement, but we're really leaning into our mission statement. And our mission statement says, in partnership with the community, we are developing empathetic global citizens. That's what we're doing. That's what the school district is for. So we're here to make sure that our kids are not only successful in this space, but in all spaces. And we're going to give them every opportunity and everything we can to make sure that they get it. Point blank, period. I think I'm done now.
So powerful. Please.
I was just gonna say, this mic is a little hot, because he's spitting fire on it. But the one thing that I wanna just elevate up is what I heard both from Chuck and Nicole is value. What do you value? What do you value? And then it's, which Chuck is an amazing at doing this, who, not how. How most people are stuck in, how are we going to do this? And it seems so big and overwhelming, then you don't do anything. Instead of saying, who can help me do this? And all of the programs that they're talking about, they found the who. Who can help? Who can I talk to? Who can do this for us? It's not how can I do it, because if you have to do something on your own, sometimes a lot of this stuff that we're talking about, getting computers in students' hands and all of these things, it's heavy lifting. And most of the time, in most spaces, there are only a few people who are willing to do the heavy lifting, or who are always doing the heavy lifting and who burn out. And then nothing gets done, or it gets started, and then it comes to a halt. And so if everybody's lifting a little bit, you're lifting inside of your district and you're using the community, then you can figure out those who's, and then the hows take care of themselves.
Thank you. Just want to add one thing to that. And basically, and this is something that I share with you a lot, how is none of our business. How? I don't care how. We just need to get it done. So we can talk to the people and we'll figure this out, but I don't care how it gets done. And typically, well, not even typically, it always gets done. I mean, how did we get this book? How did we do this? I don't know, but it's here in my hand. And it was just an idea, and we did this in like 8 weeks. So it's like we get on it, we start, and then Dr. King had the saying. He said this quote, and it's like, you can travel across the country by car at night by only seeing 200 feet in front of you. So you don't have to see the end, you just have to see the next 200 feet. And that's all we do. We just think about, what's the next 200 feet? I don't know how this is going to wind up. I just know that I'm going to be in New York from California. I'm going to have a book. We're going to have an esports room. We're going to have a cybersecurity program. You're going to have a company. You're going to be CEO of a company. You're going to be the CEO of 2 companies, one of them a tech company. I'm just going to be here with all this greatness up here on this stage.
So a couple things that obviously it's relationships. It's that shared vision. It's digging down that commitment. And you all have so amazingly emulated that. So in that relationship vein, Nicole, I'm going to throw this one to you. How can you, knowing that you've got these vested partners, you're breaking these relationships, involve students, parents, and that broader community, like Chuck had just touched on, for us to make really good decisions? So MTSS, equity, braiding in those perspectives.
Yeah, so a lot of what both Dr. Herrings have shared really answer that question phenomenally. But a couple things that I want to say before I forget. Dr. Chuck, I call them Dr. Chuck-isms. One thing I would love if he could expound on a reframe of language. You're saying opportunity youth versus at-risk?
Yes.
Is that my interpretation?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I wanted you all to catch that, okay? Because that is such an important and valuable reframe. Opportunity youth. That's a key theme that you're hearing throughout this, because at risk really insinuates that we're blaming the child for the risk that they are navigating in a system that was not created for them. So I just want to put that out there. So in answer to your question, I think it's very valuable to ensure that in MTSS in particular, when we are developing our teams, so let's think about who we typically engage. We engage our teachers from every grade level, a specialist of some kind, whether it's a school psychologist, school counselor, school social worker, an administrator. That's often your core MTSS team. Since PBIS has evolved over time, the need to have a student person or a family member is something that's a part of our fidelity measures now. What I would challenge us to do is not get caught up in creating that role as window dressing. What do I mean by that? Don't just invite a student or a family member to simply be there. Their voice is valuable. How do you ensure that they have an equity of understanding when they're sitting at this table? Earlier, Dr. Jason Peterson was saying, imagine if you were a parent and you walk into this room and sit up here like we're all sitting, and this whole audience is looking at you. That's how families feel a lot of times when they come into our school settings and we're speaking educationese to them, and they're like, what is happening? Or why am I here? So I think if anything, the intentionality around building equity of understanding is pivotal for students and families to feel a connection and a willingness to be a part of this team, and they're not just there for the look of it. It's so critical. I've seen it where families have stopped attending because they're like, what is the point of me coming here? I'm simply just here and you're talking all around me. In the School District of Philadelphia, is anyone here from the School District of Philadelphia? Okay. I can remember hearing from them that as they were developing their PBIS teams, what they did was actually offered modules of training to family members before they were able to join those teams. That didn't mean they couldn't be on the team, but it offered the family members the opportunity to feel a little bit more confident and comfortable coming into that space. I've seen the same thing happen with student groups. In Virginia, there's a division in Virginia where the students actually, again, like we were talking about here, trained other students on how to be members of the PBIS team. In addition to that, those same students trained staff members on how they could be better staff members and building relationships with them. So you can leverage all of these voices in ways that really become impactful, and MTSS can be a great starting place.
I feel like that really touches on this morning when you were talking about just that strength-based lens and how we have to flip the script and not looking at problem solving, how are we going to look at needs and how we, absolutely, needs fulfillment. So thank you. So an extension of that, and this comes back to Dr. Chuck, how can educators build culturally responsive teaching practices into their professional development? And that is the last submitted question, so that we could probably open up and expand until our hearts are content.
So how can we, well, you know how we can do that. It's chapter 49, right?
There you go. Tell them
You guys know about chapter 49? No. Okay. I don't know why you're supposed to. Like literally, you are all supposed to know. How many of you work in schools, like a public school, charter school in here? Everybody works in this school, public school, charter school in here?
It's coming.
Yeah. So just go ahead. Chapter 49, part of that is culturally responsive, sustainable educational competencies. There are 9 of them. And so these things, again, money clap, kudos to my good friend, my child over here, Dr. Nicole Holland Sims, because she was a big part of helping the legislature and the Pennsylvania Department of Education push these things through. And so those competencies or how we can do it. We lean on the stuff that we have, right? And like I said, I lean on my mission statement. Part of the things that we do, and I'm just super proud and honored to say that my students have a big part of that, because we came up with the ground rules for brave conversations. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that we do to help mitigate curriculum-based and school-based trauma. The faculty and my colleagues and I, we came up with our DEI lesson filtering tool. This is part of that as well. And this is a 4-question tool that helps mitigate curriculum-based trauma, because there are lessons that are out there that are really damaging to people. For example, there's lessons, you think about this, you walk into a building, you're the only student of color in the classroom, and you have a lesson that's going to be on slavery or the enslaved. And you already feel kind of weird about it because you know this is coming, and you're the only person there. And then as soon as the teacher turns on the video, opens the book, tells you to open up your laptop, and it pops up, and then all eyes turn to you. Like you said, that fishbowl. And so what the lesson filtering tool does is we look at those lessons and we say, we're not going to hide from things that have happened in the past. That's not a part of it. But what we are going to do is we're going to go through and make sure that we're going to mitigate the trauma that these kids will experience because of these lessons. That's what we have to do. And so we do this in community with one another. And I was sharing with someone, I don't know if she's in the room or not, but I was sharing with someone after I spoke. Oh, there she is. And I said that it was a heavy lift the first year, because the 4 questions that we ask, they're really simple questions, and you do it in community. So it's about usually 3 or 4 people. 3 or 4 people working on it, so because we all have blind spots and we might miss something, so we could catch it a lot easier. And once you go through it, it's not challenging at all. But that first year, it's a heavy lift, because you're going through every lesson that you have. Because we had a situation where there was a lesson that I was like, I don't know how this lesson was in here. It was like, who put this? What? You know what I mean? It was crazy. It was national news, the whole 9 yards. And it was like, holy smokes. So again, we started looking at things. And when we looked at it, it was like, now looking at our stuff in community, that blind spot would have been pointed out right out the gate. Hey, you might want to think about this because of X, Y, and Z. So when you do that type of stuff, when you have these types of conversations with your community, with your school community, with everyone else, now those culturally responsive standards, that DEI lesson filtering tool, the things that we're working together, it becomes, to get back what Christine said, it's not as heavy of a lift when we're doing these things together. The first year, when we went through it, it was a heavy lift because we had to go through every lesson. Now, it's not, because now we're just going through new units, tweaking old things. And now it's just like we're really looking at those things because the other stuff has already been looked at. So it takes, whereas before it may have taken hours, now it takes minutes. So that's one of the things I want to say. Do you want to share anything? Oh, thank you.
Well, I think it's spotlighted. We're going to take the how out. You're going to jump in and find all your who's to get the work done.
Can I just give a shout out to Dr. Chuck and of course to Dr. Chrissy always, but the DEI filtering tool is an innovation that has not been seen across this Commonwealth. And so I think it's valuable to know that you have people in our midst that are setting the trend and setting the bar on how you can be better and more effective in your practices. And I'm not just saying it because I love them, but it's because I've actually seen how valuable this can be. And it doesn't mean that you, like he said, you don't have to reinvent a wheel, but you can just refine what you're doing and make sure that it is conducive for every learner that you're engaging with. So I just wanted to give a shout out publicly about how great the work has been with that filtering tool.
Fantastic. Well, your expertise, your eloquence, I wish we had 3 more days.
I know.
We have 5 precious moments, and may we open it up, and if there's a question, if we could just make sure that we repeat it up here for the sake of capturing. But does anyone in the audience have an extension or a question that we can put out there. Yes, ma'am.
How do we combat what's happening nationally using some of the tools that you mentioned, the DEI tool, with using that in other states or other areas where education is being
Okay. How do we combat some of the challenges that other states are having when it comes to handcuffing teachers to teach things that, okay, you got the gist of it. That's a big question, right? Yeah, we don't necessarily have the answer, but what I do know is that it starts with a conversation. And my big thing is when I'm doing this work, yeah, sure, absolutely. I have some timers.
Yeah,
So.
I know. Well, one thing I do want to
forgot
say
already.
on that is that the reason why I think that's a really, really challenging question is because Chuck is able to do what he's able to do at South Fayette because he's valued there, and he has created a community and an environment where he has kept the bullets off the leadership's back. But we have been in schools together before I left the classroom where he was handcuffed as a black man in that space. And it got to a point where he couldn't grow, he couldn't do anything, and so he had to leave that space and then go find other ways to support the families that were left behind. So he didn't just leave and just be like, forget you guys. He had to do it through a different avenue. And so I don't know that when you have people in charge and who are in leadership, if they don't value and they're not willing to support the work, you will just be banging your head up against the wall. Like I suffer post-traumatic, PTSD? In a school where they wanted to put me on an improvement plan because I wanted to protect students. And so I had to go outside of that space and then still have relationships with those families and those students. And so I don't know that, that's a huge question that, unfortunately, not one person can tackle that. It's gonna be people being able to bring in new leadership that value, that want to make those changes. And that can be slow going and take a really, well, that's kind of repeating myself, but yeah, but it's just, yeah.
No, that's really good. And the crazy thing is that when she took that class that they wanted to put her on an improvement plan for, there were 27 kids in the class, 24 were below basic. End of the school year, 27 kids in the class, 25 proficient to advanced. So, but it's like, yeah. So it's like, but the improvement plan was because she didn't follow the curriculum with fidelity. And so it's like, I'm not about curriculum, I'm about kids. That's it. So, but the thing that I was thinking to answer that question in a very broad way is that the way that I look at the world is that my goal is to take neutral people who are neutral, to try to move them to positive towards what we're doing. Mm-hmm. Negative people, if I can get them to go from negative to neutral, that's great, but I'm not really focused on them. I'm focused on neutral to positive and getting the positive people to do stuff. That goes back to that who. Because the positive people there's way more positive people out there in the world than there are negative people, but the positive people don't do much because they're not asked to do much. They don't know what to do. So my goal is to get them to go ahead and do things and to take those neutral people and get them to positive.
Fantastic.
Actually, yeah.
Unfortunately, we're probably going to have to close on that. So those connections to elevate that strength-based, knowing your resources. I can't thank you all enough and your expertise. Thank you, thank you. This will close out today.